Space exploration has always been about pushing the limits of what's possible. But behind the achievements and discoveries, some tragedies remind us of the dangers. In this video, we'll look at 5 of the most tragic losses in spaceflight history. Real stories of astronauts who paid the ultimate price. On April 23, 1967, Soviet cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov became infamous as the man who fell from space during the ill-fated Soyuz 1 mission. This mission, intended to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Communist Revolution, ended in tragedy instead of triumph. Vladimir Komarov was born on March 16, 1927 in Moscow, and from a young age, he was captivated by aviation. At 15, he joined the Soviet Air Force, and by 1949, he became a pilot. Around this time, he married Valentina Yakovlevna Kiselyova. His love for the sky led him to graduate from the Zhukovsky Air Force Engineering Academy in 1959. And he was soon selected as one of 18 men to train as cosmonauts during the height of the space race between the Soviet Union and the United States. In 1964, Komarov piloted Voskhod 1, the first spacecraft to carry more than one person into space. Though not the first man in space, that title belonged to Yuri Gagarin, Komarov was respected for his skills and experience. By 1967, with the anniversary of the Communist Revolution approaching, the Soviet Union planned a spectacular mission. 2 space capsules would be launched into orbit. Komarov would pilot Soyuz 1 and Soyuz 2 would follow. The 2 capsules were to meet in low Earth orbit, and Komarov would perform a daring spacewalk between them, a maneuver never attempted before. However, the mission was doomed from the start. Rumors suggested Soyuz 1 had numerous unresolved structural issues. Some engineers and cosmonauts, including Gagarin, urged for the mission's postponement, fearing the worst. Despite these warnings, political pressure forced the launch to proceed. Knowing that Gagarin would take his place if he refused, Komarov chose to go ahead, even reportedly requesting an open casket funeral if anything went wrong, a sign of his awareness of the dangers. On April 23, 1967, Yuri Gagarin made a last-ditch attempt to stop the mission, but his efforts were in vain. Komarov boarded the spacecraft, and the mission began. Over 24 hours, Komarov orbited the Earth 16 times, but things quickly went wrong. One of the spacecraft's 2 solar panels failed to deploy, leaving it without sufficient power. The mission's objectives became impossible, and the launch of Soyuz 2 was cancelled. Komarov was ordered to return to Earth. Re-entry was where disaster struck. The spacecraft began spinning uncontrollably, and Komarov struggled to regain control. After 2 additional orbits, he finally attempted re-entry, but at 23,000 feet, the parachute failed to deploy. The lines had become tangled, likely due to earlier issues. Komarov plummeted helplessly toward Earth, and the capsule crashed with the force of a 2.8-ton meteorite. The impact was so severe that the spacecraft exploded on contact, reducing Komarov to charred remains. He became the first known human to die during a space mission. Reports of Komarov's final moments have been debated. Some claim that US listening posts intercepted a transmission in which Komarov cursed the spacecraft, calling it a devil ship and discussing its failures. However, space historian Robert Pearlman and others question the authenticity of these dramatic accounts. The official Soviet transcript paints a different picture, with Komarov calmly reporting, "I feel excellent. Everything's in order," shortly before the fatal impact. Despite the gruesome nature of his death, the Soviet Union honored Komarov. His ashes were placed in the Kremlin Wall necropolis, and the asteroid 1836 Komarov and a crater on the Moon were named in his honor. His death was a tragic chapter in the space race, showing us the immense risks cosmonauts faced during this era and the dangers of pushing technological boundaries too quickly under political pressure. It was January 28, 1986, a day meant to be a milestone in space exploration. 7 astronauts, including a teacher, were about to go on a mission that captivated millions, but instead of celebration, the day ended in tragedy, changing the course of space exploration forever. The Space Shuttle Challenger, officially designated NASA Orbiter Vehicle OV-99, was set for its 10th mission. The shuttle had completed 9 missions since its first launch in April 1983. However, this mission would test the Challenger in a way no one expected. The Challenger crew was diverse and accomplished, with each member bringing unique skills to the mission. Mission Commander Francis R. Scobie, an experienced astronaut and U.S. Air Force veteran with over 6,500 flight hours, led the team. Scobie was passionate about flying and exploring new frontiers. On his first spaceflight, pilot Michael J. Smith was a veteran U.S. Navy aviator. He, like Scobie, was eager to advance space science. Mission specialist Judith A. Resnick, an electrical engineer with a Ph.D., had already made history as the second American woman in space. She was known for her intelligence and dedication to scientific exploration. Another mission specialist, Ronald E. McNair, was a physicist with a Ph.D. from MIT and the second African American in space. He made significant contributions to quantum electronics and laser technology, and was also a talented saxophonist. Ellison S. Onizuka, the final mission specialist, was an Air Force officer and the first Asian American in space. Born in Hawaii, Onizuka was known for his calm demeanor and technical expertise. Gregory B. Jarvis, a payload specialist from Hughes Aircraft Corporation, was excited to contribute his expertise in satellite technology. Sharon Krista McAuliffe, a high school teacher from New Hampshire, was perhaps the most well-known crew member. Selected from over 11,000 applicants, she was to be the first teacher in space, conducting lessons from orbit to inspire students and educators nationwide. The STS-51L mission, Challenger's 10th flight, was highly anticipated. Its primary goal was to deploy a communications satellite to improve shuttle mission communications. The crew also planned to study Halley's Comet with the Spartan-Halley satellite, contributing to international research efforts. McAuliffe's live teaching sessions from space were a mission highlight. They were designed to engage students and spark interest in science. On January 28, 1986, the Challenger crew boarded the shuttle at Kennedy Space Center. After several delays due to weather and technical issues, the countdown finally reached zero at 11:38 a.m. EST, and Challenger lifted off. For the first 73 seconds, everything seemed normal. The shuttle ascended, and the crew focused on their tasks. Millions watched the live broadcast, especially schoolchildren eager to see their teacher, Krista McAuliffe, make history. But then, tragedy struck. The Challenger exploded in mid-air, just 73 seconds after liftoff, at about 46,000 feet. The shuttle disintegrated into a cloud of smoke and debris, the horrifying scene captured live on television. Rescue teams were dispatched, but there was no hope of survivors. In the aftermath, the Rogers Commission, led by former Secretary of State William P. Rogers, investigated the disaster. The investigation revealed that the explosion was caused by a failure in the right solid rocket motor's O-ring seals. These seals, designed to prevent hot gases from escaping, had become brittle due to the cold temperatures, leading to a catastrophic failure. The Challenger disaster had far-reaching consequences. The shuttle program was grounded for nearly 3 years as NASA overhauled its safety procedures. The tragedy also prompted a re-evaluation of the space program's goals, with an increased focus on safety. In April 1986, the families of the Challenger crew founded the Challenger Center for Space Science Education to honor their loved ones. These centers offer hands-on learning experiences, inspiring science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM education students. The Challenger disaster remains a significant event in space exploration history, reminding us of the risks in pursuing discovery and the courage of those who take them. On January 27, 1967, NASA's Apollo 1 mission was set to be the first crewed mission in the Apollo program. It was ultimately aimed at landing a man on the moon. The crew consisted of 3 astronauts: Air Force Colonel Virgil I., Gus Grissom, Air Force Colonel Edward H. White II, and Navy Lieutenant Commander Roger B. Chaffee. A veteran astronaut, Grissom was the second American to fly in space. White had made history as the first American to walk in space during the Gemini 4 mission. Chaffee, the youngest, was preparing for his first spaceflight. They were skilled and dedicated, ready to push the boundaries of space exploration. The day began routinely for the Apollo team as they were sealed inside the command module at Cape Kennedy's Launch Complex 34. They were participating in a simulation that mimicked the countdown for the actual launch, scheduled less than a month away. The spacecraft's cabin was pressurized with pure oxygen, a standard practice. Disaster struck at 6:31 p.m., just 10 minutes before a simulated liftoff. One of the astronauts shouted, "Fire in the spacecraft!" Flames erupted inside the cabin with terrifying speed, quickly engulfing the entire module. Smoke filled the area around the spacecraft as emergency crews rushed to open the hatches. Unfortunately, it took 5 minutes to get the doors open, but by then, the intense heat and smoke had already claimed the lives of Grissom, White, and Chaffee. This tragedy marked the first fatalities for NASA during a space mission, and was a dark day for both the agency and the nation. The loss was deeply felt across the United States amid the space race with the Soviet Union. President Lyndon B. Johnson expressed the nation's grief, stating, "3 valiant young men have given their lives in the nation's service." Vice President Hubert H. Humphrey and former President Dwight D. Eisenhower also shared their sorrow. Even Radio Moscow, representing the Soviet Union, respected the fallen astronauts' courage. In the wake of the disaster, NASA launched a thorough investigation led by the Apollo 204 Review Board. The investigation revealed critical flaws in the design and management of the Apollo spacecraft. The fire started due to an electrical spark, likely caused by frayed wiring beneath Grissom's seat. The pure oxygen atmosphere, pressurized at 16.7 pounds per square inch, was highly flammable, causing the fire to spread rapidly. The spacecraft's pressure vessel ruptured due to the intense heat, releasing toxic gases that led to the astronauts' deaths by asphyxiation. One of the most significant design flaws identified was the inward opening hatch, which took at least 90 seconds to open under normal conditions. In an emergency, with increased internal pressure and fire raging, the astronauts couldn't escape. This flaw and the lack of emergency preparedness for a non-hazardous test proved fatal. The tragedy prompted a major overhaul of the Apollo program. NASA implemented extensive changes, including a redesigned hatch that could be opened in 3 seconds. They reduced the amount of flammable material inside the spacecraft, improved wiring, and developed a new flame-resistant spacesuit. Management changes followed, and NASA established the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel to provide independent safety oversight. Despite the loss, the Apollo program continued. Less than 3 years later, on July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 landed on the Moon, achieving the goal the Apollo 1 crew had worked toward. The legacy of Grissom, White, and Chaffee lived on in this historic achievement. Today, the Apollo 1 command module's hatch is displayed at the Kennedy Space Center as a tribute to the fallen astronauts and a reminder of the sacrifices made in pursuing space exploration. On January 16, 2003, NASA's Space Shuttle Columbia launched what was supposed to be a successful mission into space, known as STS-107. The 16-day mission aimed to conduct various scientific experiments in microgravity. 7 astronauts were aboard the shuttle, each representing a pinnacle of human achievement. These individuals were Commander Rick D. Husband, Pilot William C. McCool, Payload Commander Michael P. Anderson, Mission Specialists David M. Brown, Kalpana Chawla, Laurel B. Clark, and Ilan Ramon from the Israeli Space Agency. The crew was selected in July 2000 and had trained together for nearly 3 years. Their bond extended beyond their professional duties. They spent time together outside work, often involving their families in social activities like cookouts and games. This fellowship was crucial for the mission, especially under Commander Rick Husband's leadership, who emphasized teamwork at work and home. One of the crew's memorable bonding experiences was an outdoor team-building trip to Wyoming. Mission Specialist David Brown documented the trip, which captured the crew's excitement and unity. This strong connection was vital as they went on their journey into space. On January 16, 2003, at 10:39 a.m. EST, Columbia lifted off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The mission was divided into 2 teams. The red team, consisting of Husband, Chawla, Clark, and Ramon, and the blue team, comprised of McCool, Anderson, and Brown. This division allowed for continuous research operations during the 16-day mission. It focused on microgravity research, with 80 experiments conducted in Columbia's payload bay. However, a week into the mission, engineers noticed something troubling. Approximately 82 seconds after liftoff, a piece of foam insulation from the shuttle's external tank struck Columbia's left wing. Although similar foam strikes had occurred in the past without significant issues, this one caused concern. Engineers requested high-resolution images to assess the damage, but mission managers denied the request, believing it posed no serious threat. Unaware of the potential danger, the crew continued their experiments, maintaining a positive outlook. They even participated in a radio call with the International Space Station crew and paid tribute to past astronauts who had perished in earlier space tragedies. As the mission drew close, the crew began preparing for their return to Earth. On February 1, 2003, Columbia began its descent. The crew was eager to return home and share their experiences. But as the shuttle re-entered Earth's atmosphere, tragedy struck. The foam strike had severely damaged Columbia's left wing, causing the shuttle to break apart over Texas, killing all 7 crew members instantly. The loss of Columbia was a devastating blow to NASA and the world. An extensive investigation revealed that the foam strike during launch had indeed caused catastrophic damage. For the families of the crew, the tragedy was an unimaginable loss. Jonathan Clark, who was in mission control during the shuttle's final moments, lost his wife, Laurel. He later focused on making human spaceflight safer, ensuring that lessons from the Columbia disaster would be applied to future missions. Evelyn Husband, Rick's wife, struggled with grief, but chose to focus on her faith and relationships with NASA. She became involved in efforts to learn from the disaster, hoping to prevent future tragedies. Despite the tragic end to their mission, the Columbia crew's legacy endures. Their dedication, teamwork, and commitment to science continue to inspire future generations. The research they conducted during their 16 days in space has contributed to advancements in space exploration. For the families left behind, the memories of their loved ones are cherished and continue to shape their lives. It was June 29, 1971, at 1:30 p.m. in Moscow. Members of the State Commission overseeing the Salyut space station operations gathered at NIP-16, the control center for Soviet human spaceflight on the Crimean Peninsula. Among them was Vasily Mishin, designer general at Takibem, who had just arrived after overseeing a failed launch of the N-1 moon rocket 2 days earlier. Despite this setback, the commission focused on the crew's return aboard Soyuz 11. Cosmonauts Georgy Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Patsayev had completed a record-breaking 23 days in space and were ready for undocking and landing. As the evening progressed, the 3 cosmonauts settled into their seats aboard Soyuz 11 and closed the hatch between the descent and habitation modules. However, an open hatch signal lit up on their console, indicating a problem. The light remained on, even though the hatch was closed. Volkov, known for his impatience, demanded a solution from ground control. Following advice from cosmonaut Alexei Yeliseev, the crew reopened and reclosed the hatch, but the light stayed on. Without protective suits, they knew a breach in the airtight seal could be deadly. Mission controllers instructed the crew to inspect a sensor on the edge of the hatch. Dobrovolsky placed a small tape under the sensor and closed the hatch again. After a tense half hour, the warning light finally turned off. To ensure the descent module was secure, some air was vented from the habitation module, and no change in pressure was observed, confirming the hatch was sealed. At 9:25 p.m. Moscow time, Soyuz 11 undocked from Salyut. Following ground instructions, Dobrovolsky maneuvered the spacecraft near the station, while Patsayev took photos. Some of these images of Salyut in orbit surfaced decades later. Hours later, at 12:16 a.m. on June 30, 1971, Nikolai Kamenin, the head of cosmonaut training, communicated with the crew, informing them of the weather at their landing site in Kazakhstan. The skies were mostly clear, with visibility at 10 kilometers, light winds, a temperature of around 16 degrees Celsius, and air pressure at 720 millimeters. Kamanin reminded the cosmonauts to provide voice commentary during all phases of descent and wished them a safe landing. Dobrovolsky assured him everything was fine and thanked him for the good wishes. Telemetry indicated everything was functioning as expected aboard Soyuz 11 as it completed its third orbit in autonomous flight. Engineers and officials at NIP-16 watched anxiously as the spacecraft prepared for re-entry. At 1:35 a.m. Moscow time, Soyuz 11 fired its engine to initiate re-entry. A tracking ship in the Atlantic confirmed the braking maneuver went as scheduled, but repeated attempts to establish voice communications with the crew failed. The expected time of separation of the descent module passed without any word from the cosmonauts. The absence of contact was deeply troubling, but many possible explanations existed. Soviet air defense radar detected the descent module at 1:54 a.m. Moscow time, still 2,200 kilometers from the landing site, tracking its path toward touchdown. At 2:02 a.m., the main parachute deployed without issue, and the capsule descended normally. Despite the parachute's antenna being capable of transmitting voice communications, the crew remained silent. At 2:16 a.m. Moscow time, the descent module touched down on the grasslands of Kazakhstan, 202 kilometers east of Zhezkazgan. Recovery helicopters and an Il-14 aircraft quickly located the capsule. 4 helicopters landed nearby, and search specialists hurried to the capsule. Within a minute, they opened the hatch to a grim sight: the lifeless bodies of all 3 cosmonauts. Despite frantic efforts to resuscitate them, the cosmonauts were gone. The initial reports from the landing site were devastating. General Gorgliad, en route from the landing site to Zhezkazgan, radioed the tragic news, which spread quickly among the State Commission. Mishin, Kerimov, and Minister Afanasyev were reluctant to accept the worst without confirmation. It took another hour before their fears were confirmed. As the world learned of the tragedy, the Soviet Union mourned. On July 1st and 2, 1971, the USSR held somber funeral ceremonies for the fallen cosmonauts, who were laid to rest in the Kremlin's wall near the ashes of Vladimir Komarov, who had died in the Soyuz 1 disaster 4 years earlier. But the investigation into what went wrong with Soyuz 11 was just beginning. On July 3rd, the State Commission formed several subcommissions to investigate different aspects of the mission. These subcommissions focused on data analysis, pressure valve function, the overall systems of the descent module, medical issues, flight control, crew work, and operations aboard Salyut. By late July 1971, engineers had shifted focus from understanding the cause of the tragedy to designing measures to prevent a similar incident in the future. The Soyuz 11 disaster became a pivotal moment in space exploration. It highlighted the need for enhanced safety protocols and significantly changed Soviet space missions.